Good evening, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching World News Tonight, live from Warsaw. If we don't do it the easy way, we're going to do it the hard way, says Donald Trump about his plans to acquire Greenland. Is NATO on the verge of an internal conflict? We'll have more on that in just a moment, but first let's take a look at tonight's headlines. Iran authorities signal a crackdown on the largest protest against the regime in years. Body camera footage shows the killing of a Minneapolis resident by ICE from a different perspective. And NASA brings back ISS crew due to a medical issue suffered by one of the astronauts. US President Donald Trump is determined to take over Greenland and threatens to do so the hard way, with concerns over mounting tensions around the island growing among NATO allies. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio is meeting with Danish and Greenlandic representatives next week. Paweł Trzaskowski reports.
With the dust after the US operation in Venezuela slowly settling, Washington is already moving on to its next target, Greenland. During Trump's second term, there has been little tiptoeing around the idea of the US taking control of this autonomous region of Denmark. For now, Washington says it can offer either a carrot or a stick.
We're going to be doing something with Greenland, either the nice way or the more difficult.
The nice way could reportedly involve some financial incentive to the Greenlanders, an offer so far met with reservations in Nuuk.
I hate him with my whole being. I don't want him to buy Greenland. Greenland is not for sale.
Not
you can say any number,
any number in the world, and we'll know, and we'll say no. It belongs to us and only us only.
The difficult way could involve military action on the territory of a fellow NATO member. Both scenarios cause concern in Europe, and support for Denmark follows.
I'm very concerned about the Greenland issue, and I'm also very concerned about the events in the United States and everything that's building such ideological and political tension within NATO and the United States itself.
But tensions are only mounting as Washington warns it's serious about its intentions.
I guess my advice to European leaders and anybody else would be to take the President of the United States seriously.
Washington says Greenland is crucial for its security.
We are going to do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not, because if we don't do it, Russia or China will take over Greenland, and we're not going to have Russia or China as a neighbor.
Denmark has always been the United States' staunch ally, and Washington has been allowed a lot of freedom in Greenland, including operating a military airbase there since the 1950s.
The idea was that Greenland, was this important early warning space versus the Soviet Union.
American nuclear weapons were stored on the island. For some time, their presence was even denied by Copenhagen to the Danish people. But despite all this leeway, the US wants more control over this territory, perhaps also because of what is hidden beneath the ground.
I think another reason for the interest is the perception that there are a number of rare earth metals in Greenland.
However, apart from security and riches, a third factor might also be at play.
Trump wants to appear tough. He wants to appear tough in the eyes of his MAGA constituency.
But will this toughness translate to successful negotiations? US Secretary of State Marco Rubio is set to meet with representatives of Denmark and Greenland next week. But reportedly Greenland is already considering holding talks on its own, a sign that Trump's strategy might be working. Paweł Trzaskowski for TVP World.
As Moscow attempts to deprive Ukrainians of electricity and heating by constant shelling of the country's energy facilities, it has also sent a strong message to Kiev's allies in the West, striking the Lviv region near the border with Poland with its Oreshnik ballistic missile. The UN Security Council will convene on Monday to discuss the latest escalation. Kazimierz Łysiak has this report.
Darkness in Ukraine, and now darkness in Russia. Since Moscow keeps targeting Ukrainian energy infrastructure in the middle of winter, Kyiv responded with the same, plunging the city of Belgorod into a major blackout on Friday night. The war has become just as much about energy as it is about land.
The Russians are taking advantage of the weather, the cold snap, and trying to hit as many of our energy facilities as possible. It's clear how much they respect America and diplomacy.
Russia is not only deliberately targeting Ukraine's power grid, but also residential buildings. Its effects shown by British Defence Secretary John Healey, who briefly took on the role of a war correspondent while on an official visit to Kyiv.
Overnight, Kyiv was subjected to what President Zelensky has just told me he described as a brutal attack. You can see the effect here. Many of these drones and missiles aim directly at residential buildings like this. So half of Kyiv in this area has woken up to no power, no heating, no water.
The Defence Secretary also took this opportunity to announce additional funding for the future British troops to be put in Ukraine after a potential ceasefire.
I'm confirming that we've committed £200 million, which I'm accelerating now, to prepare British troops for that deployment in the event of a peace deal.
But first, Russia would need to agree to a peace deal. And while Ukraine, Europe and the United States are finalizing the initial peace documents, Russia used hypersonic ballistic missiles Oreshnik, capable of carrying nuclear warheads, just a few dozen kilometers away from the border with Poland.
Following our urgent request in the wake of Russia's recent attacks on Ukraine, which included the use of an intermediate-range ballistic missile, the UN Security Council will convene an emergency meeting on Monday, January the 12th. The meeting will address Russia's flagrant breaches of the UN Charter.
It's a political demonstration of force vis-à-vis Europeans, but also Americans. These weapons, these rockets, can be used also on some American targets.
Ukraine and Europe are now hoping for a strong reaction from US President Donald Trump. He already greenlit the bipartisan bill on robust secondary sanctions on Russia's biggest energy clients, China, India and Brazil, soon to be voted on in Congress.
So it's all really about the giving President Trump instruments in his approaches towards Russia in order to force Russia to come to the negotiating table.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky would also like to see President Trump repeat his recent military extraction of Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro, but with Vladimir Putin instead.
If it's possible to deal with dictators this way, then the US knows what to do next.
The US president is still giving Putin the benefit of the doubt, though, albeit with a grain of salt.
Would you ever order a mission to go and capture Vladimir Putin?
Well, I don't think it's going to be necessary. I think we're going to have I've always had a great relationship with him. I'm very disappointed.
Despite Trump's disappointment, Vladimir Putin refuses to seriously engage in peace talks. And so Ukraine and Russia will soon enter the 5th year of fighting. For TVP World, Kazimierz Łysiak.
As escalating mass anti-government demonstrations in Iran enter the second week, European media report that Iranian authorities are preparing for a potential escape from the country. Allegedly, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei plans to flee to Moscow. Konrad Gorliński reports.
Despite a now almost complete internet blackout in the country, these are the images coming out of Iran. Protests continued across the country well into the night on Friday. The most widespread demonstrations in years began in late December over soaring prices and inflation, but quickly escalated into political unrest, with crowds calling for an end to the theocratic regime in place since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. That anger is starkly reflected in this image of a burning mosque. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei struck a defiant tone in his first comments on the protests on Friday.
We will not back down in the face of those who engage in destruction, nor will we tolerate mercenaries serving foreign powers.
Authorities have blamed the unrest on the United States and Israel. On Saturday, Iran's Revolutionary Guards warned that security is a red line as efforts to crush the protests intensified. Human rights groups say the death toll is rising. Since December 28th, at least 51 protesters have been killed and more than 2,300 arrested. For its part, the United States looks to be amassing significant naval and air forces at military bases in the Persian Gulf.
So Iran's in big trouble. It looks to me that the people are taking over certain cities that nobody thought were really possible just a few weeks ago. We're watching the situation very carefully.
At the same time, reports suggest senior figures in Tehran may be preparing escape plans. France's Le Figaro says at least 20 high-ranking Iranian officials have applied for French visas for themselves and their families. The Times of London, citing British intelligence sources, reports that Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei may be considering a move to Russia, potentially fleeing to Moscow with close family members and assets estimated at nearly $100 billion. And now, the exiled son of Iran's ousted Shah, Reza Pahlavi, on Saturday urged Iranians to seize and hold city centers, calling on workers in key sectors to launch a nationwide strike.
I also ask all of you, today and tomorrow, Saturday and Sunday, this time from 6 p.m., to come into the streets with flags, images and national symbols, and to claim public spaces as your own.
But while some view a return to monarchy as preferable to the current regime, many Iranians remain distrustful and wary of any form of authoritarian rule.
People of Iran want to move forward, and they are denying, they are rejecting all sorts of dictatorship, whether crowned or clerical.
Analysts caution against drawing early conclusions, but for now, the momentum on the streets of Iran appears to be moving toward change. For TVP World, I'm Conrad Gorlinski.
A new video footage showing the moment Rene Good is shot by an ICE officer on Wednesday is circulating in American media. It's added to the discussion on abuse of force by federal agents as protests against the actions have erupted across the US. Franciszek Pilis has this report.
Protests following the deadly shooting of Rene Good, a 37-year-old woman and mother of a 6-year-old child, by an officer of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, have taken over the streets of Minneapolis, Minnesota since late Wednesday.
All our community is here because ICE is here and they're leaving blood all over our state, our country, our nation, and we want ICE out. It feels like a third world country. I feel ashamed for the president that we elected. ICE has the right to work, but not to harass people, not to intimidate communities.
Footage of the shooting previously uploaded online showed what looked like borderline unprovoked abuse of force. However, a new point of view of the incident captured by the officer's body cam has raised questions among the American public as to what actually happened on January 7th.
Get out of the
U.S. President Donald Trump, who said the victim, quote, viciously ran over the ICE officer in a post on social media, vowed to protect other ICE agents from scrutiny.
You have agitators, and we will always be protecting ICE, and we're always going to be protecting our Border Patrol and our law enforcement.
The American president, following his right-hand man, J.D. Vance's statement, also accused the late Rene Good of being a paid agitator without presenting any evidence.
Well, I haven't seen the vice president's statement, but he's generally very accurate. I hate to say. Look, I watched that yesterday, and there are a lot of different forms to it. But there was a woman screaming, shame, 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 shame. She was a agitator, probably a paid agitator, but in my opinion, she was an agitator, a very high-level agitator, so professional, she wouldn't stop screaming.
The mayor of Minneapolis, standing alongside protesters, called for an independent investigation into the shooting.
If it's not a problem to have additional people at the table that have a deep commitment to the process and transparency and have run these investigations before, then why not include them in the process?
Protests following the killing of Renee Good have spread across the U.S. like wildfire, with demonstrations taking place in New York, Boston, Baltimore, Atlanta, Dallas, Seattle, Detroit, and other cities, underlining the American people's frustrations with ICE and its operations under the Trump administration. For TVP World, Franciszek Pilis.
The SpaceX Crew 11 mission on the International Space Station has been cut short. The decision was made by NASA due to health issues. One of the astronauts has succumbed to. It's the first such incident in the long history of space travels to the ISS. Sonia Gatabiszczan reports.
NASA is coordinating its first ever medical evacuation from the International Space Station in the orbiting laboratory's 25-year history.
Thank you to all participants.
4 Crew 11 astronauts are scheduled for an early return after one of them suffered a health issue.
Usually astronauts and cosmonauts that are up there, they go through a lot of medical examinations before going to the ISS, so this is quite abnormal situation for sure.
Officials did not share details pertaining to the medical event and kept the identity of the astronaut in question confidential, citing patient privacy. But NASA's chief health officer said it is not an onboard emergency, and they're erring on the side of caution for the crew member.
The medical incident was sufficient enough that we were concerned about the astronaut, that we would like to complete that workup. And the best way to complete that workup is on the ground, where we have the full suite of medical testing hardware.
NASA also postponed its first spacewalk of 2026, when NASA astronauts were supposed to lay groundwork for future deployment of solar panels, which would supply extra power to the space station.
There we know something was wrong, because it's not common that they cancel the spacewalk because they have quite tight schedule. So this was the first warning.
The 4-person crew, consisting of NASA's Zena Cardman and Mike Fink, as well as Japan's Kimi Aoi and Russia's Oleg Platonov, arrived at the orbiting laboratory in August and was intended to stay there for at least 6 months. According to a Friday statement, NASA now targets undocking Crew 11 from the ISS on Wednesday.
NASA astronauts and our teams in mission control and our professionals who train for every possible scenario at every step of the mission, including moments just like this. I'm proud of the swift effort across the agency thus far to ensure the safety of our astronauts, and I know NASA and our commercial partners will successfully bring Crew 11 safely home.
Once 4 members of Crew 11 depart the ISS, the station will be run by just 3 astronauts. The successive Crew 12 is now targeted to launch in mid-February. For TVP World, I'm Sonia Gatabiszczan.
For the 3rd time in a row, Poland has reached the finals of the United Cup, the mixed tennis tournament held in Australia. Poland took a revenge for the finals loss last year by beating the United States. Poland won the men's singles with Hubert Hurkacz defeating Taylor Fritz. Hurkacz won 7-6 and 7-6 against the world's number 9 in his comeback tournament following a 7-month absence due to a knee injury. However, the US pulled back in the women's singles. Iga Świątek struggled against Coco Gauff and lost her match 6-4 and 6-2. The tie had to be decided by the mixed doubles. Jan Zieliński and Katarzyna Kawa saw off Gauff and Christian Harrison in 2 closely fought sets. Poland will face Switzerland in the finals on Sunday. Do teenagers care about modern art? Warsaw's most iconic art gallery, Zachęta, let the youth roam its latest exhibition and ascribed their own meanings to the artworks. Now a new version of the exhibition will open, this time curated by the young. Natalia Komarow has met with one of the educators behind the project.
Right now is the last chance to catch the first installment of the Moving Image exhibition at Zachęta National Art Gallery. In a few days, the exhibition will reopen, but this time, the new rendition will be curated by Warsaw's teenagers.
We wanted to ask young people how they feel about this collection, how they see the legacy that the foundation and cultural institutions are preparing for them to inherit. Is it still adequate? Does it move them? Is it relevant and inspiring?
Young people can be very receptive to art when they're allowed to think creatively. Zahenta invited kids aged 12 to 18 and asked them to pick out what they thought were the most interesting pieces at the exhibition, search for new meanings, and even come up with new titles.
They had pretty interesting ideas as to what materials were used in creating this piece. In general, many thought of Mother Earth, the creator of the universe, an omnipotent being, and it gave the piece a new context.
The collection young participants played around with was put together by the ING Polish Art Foundation, which has been an important patron of young artists for 25 years.
This is another piece the participants were drawn to because this installation is alive. Here we have shells, and the black caramel slowly drips as it melts, thus measuring time. The youth found it very inspiring. They connected it to climate change. Here, they immediately picked out these characters, which are sort of melted into the tapestry. And they came up with the story of a lonely person living in a cabin by the lake who is going through a mental crisis. From this emerged a world of internal demons.
Now, the kids' interventions will be put in place with the help of professionals, and on January 15, you'll get to see the new vision for yourselves. For TVP World, Natalia Komarov.
And we're back to our main topic of the day, that is raising tensions surrounding Greenland. And to talk about it, we're joined by Diane Francis, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council. Good evening.
Good evening.
So what does the US need Greenland for, and does it really need it? I mean, having already a large military base there and local government, which very much encourages the American business to invest on the island.
Yeah, when you use the word need, I think it changes a little meaning when you're talking about a territory like Greenland that the United States probably correctly perceives as very strategically important, not only in terms of its own national security going forward, but in terms of space programs and all kinds of things, shipping and espionage. And so it's important for all those reasons. And they want to own it so they have control over it, as opposed to the situation now where they have the rights to do this and that. But, I think they really don't want to get enmeshed in, the committee-style governance of NATO or the European Union, where you have to sit down and get permissions to do anything on a piece of territory from 12 or 15 different leaders. So I think it's a streamlining. It's an attempt to bypass complications when it comes to enacting whatever strategic initiatives they think are important to enact in Greenland. And direct ownership, of course, gives them complete control.
So you say that the US wants to avoid complications with the Europeans. Well, the Europeans are seriously afraid of America's next steps. And the question here is whether it's in the US interest to sow divisions within NATO.
Well, no, it isn't. But, I think it's overstated or overblown by some people, certainly Denmark, that, this means the end of NATO. This doesn't mean the end of NATO. This means the beginning of a conversation or a negotiation about, the rights that America may have to use, own, or control what goes on militarily in terms of Greenland. And they deem it very important. It's sort of like saying, well, Hawaii's a long way away, and it hasn't always been American, so why bother? But they want it. They keep it. It's strategically important. So I think it's merely a measure of bypassing all of the complications that comes with, relying on Europe or NATO to make a decision for you. They want to be able to make a decision when they want to make a decision.
Now let me quote President Donald Trump. "We are going to do something in Greenland whether they like it or not, because if we don't do it, Russia or China will take over Greenland, and we're not going to have Russia or China as a neighbor." Now, the US, if I'm not mistaken, already has Russia as its neighbor, and during the last Putin's visit to Alaska, both leaders discussed further steps to bring the countries closer together. Has Donald Trump already forgotten about it? And there's one more question here that puzzles me. Russia has been extremely quiet about the recent tensions around Greenland. Well, it has been more than vocal about Venezuela. It says absolutely nothing about Greenland. Why? Because is it serving Moscow's interests?
I don't think Moscow considers it a territory that A, it would ever acquire, or B, that is in its strategic meets its strategic requirements. I think there's a lot of catastrophizing and pumping up of egos going on in this. To sort of say that this is do or die for NATO is silly, and for Trump to say I've got to have Greenland or all bets are off as far as whatever anybody else, that's also silly. The point is that the U.S. already has surveillance, has bases, has permissions, can go there and get a mining license and dig for critical minerals anytime it wants to. But it has to go through a bureaucratic process. They just don't want to be bothered. He wants to be able to do what he wants to do when he wants to do it. I think it's as simple as that.
Donald Trump wants to do what he wants to do, absolutely so. But are there any legal mechanisms stopping Donald Trump from doing what he wants? Can he just order the troops to attack the island in the end? I mean, that's the least probable scenario, as you've already said, but...
Well, I don't know. I hope it doesn't get to loggerheads. That would be silly. Is he going to go to war with anybody over this? Of course not. Is he going to just, illegally violate Greenland's sovereignty and just plop troops down there? I don't think that's going to happen. But, I think he's going to continue the pressure on Denmark or Greenland to allow more permissions and more access to various things they want to do. And then, if they really think it's so darn important in terms of critical metals and minerals, why don't they put the money where their mouth is and go to Greenland and buy mining licenses and start to explore and develop and produce? I mean, they're free to do that, as long as they're not doing anything illegal, which wouldn't be the case. So I think it's one of those things that I think is getting a little overblown because the media is getting involved in it. And this is not an attack on NATO. That's silly.
Now, we also have a quote from Greenland's foreign minister, because you said that this pressure is put on Greenland, on Denmark as well. It seems that it's already working. The quote, "From our side, it is clear that Greenland needs the US and that the US needs Greenland. That responsibility must be taken seriously. What would be wrong with us holding meetings with the US alone?" So could the US try to take Greenland away from Denmark by simply courting the Greenlanders themselves and paying them large sums to change their minds?
Yeah, I think there was a number that was thrown out there by either Vance or someone early on saying, we'll pay you all $50,000 or $100,000 to. But the point is that there's a difference between having a relationship, a nice legal binational relationship where you do mining and you get to collaborate and have military bases or pay rent for that, employ locals for that. There's a big difference between that and just saying, I want it to be part of the United States. I mean, that means that people you're taking people away from a government system, a healthcare system, a culture that they're not interested in being part of. So I think that it should really be restricted to the business of security measures and mining opportunities and they should just sit down like grown-ups and negotiate deals. That's what I think.
Like grown-ups. Diane Francis, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, was our guest this evening. Thank you very much. Pleasure as always.
You're welcome.
And thank you for watching and stay with us for more interviews and news here on TVP World.